Welcome, everyone. I'm Candace Breyer, Chairperson of the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals is a 9-person volunteer citizen board appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the City Council. Our procedure this evening is as follows. First, we will hear from the Planning and Development Services Unit, represented tonight by Mr. John Barrett. Then the petitioner or his or her representative will make his or her presentation. Petitioners will have 5 minutes in which to make their presentations. The board members may ask questions of either the city or the petitioner. We will acknowledge any written comments received by the board. We will allow an appearing party to express their support or objections. The board will discuss the appeal and formulate a resolution to approve the appeal. 5 affirmative votes of the board will be required for an appeal to be granted. Finally, any qualified party who is aggrieved by a decision of the board can appeal that decision to the Washtenaw County Circuit Court on a timely basis. Roll call, I am here. Mike Daniel.
Here.
Dave DeVarty.
Here.
Mike Dobmeyer. Nicole Eisenman.
Here.
Todd Grant.
Here.
Julie Weatherby.
Here.
Kirk Westfall.
Here.
Charlotte Wilson.
Here.
We have a quorum. I will note quickly that Charlotte Wilson is our newest member, replacing Heather Lewis, who stepped down. So welcome, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Moving on to approval of the agenda, I will note that the last item on today's agenda, ZBA 18006 2964 Hickory Lane, has been removed from the agenda. This case is no longer being, or this appeal is no longer being considered by the ZBA. So if there's anyone here regarding that petition, we won't be discussing that petition this evening. Otherwise, are there any other comments or changes to the agenda? Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Motion from Kirk, support. From Julie, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving on to approval of minutes. We have minutes from the January 24th ZBA meeting. Are there any questions or concerns, corrections regarding those minutes? If not, can I get a motion?
I move we accept the minutes.
Motion from Dave, support from Kirk, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All
I
right,
would choose to abstain from voting since I wasn't here.
fair enough.
Yeah, thank you.
Moving on to hearings and appeals. ZBA 18001 2398 East Stadium Boulevard. John?
I'm John Barrett, zoning coordinator for the city of Ann Arbor. The first case this evening is ZBA case 18-001. The address is 2398 East Stadium Boulevard. Don Strack, Director of Construction for Trader Joe's, representing the owner's Lamp Post Limited, is seeking 2 variances from Chapter 55 zoning, Section 5:43, area, height, and placement regulations. A 16-foot 9-inch variance for the rear yard setback and a 9-foot variance for the side setback is required for the installation of a 98-square-foot cooler at the rear of the building of an existing Trader Joe's retail center. The property is zoned C1, Local Business District, and is located on the south side of Stadium Boulevard and east of Francis Drive. The zoning ordinance allows for a 0 side and rear yard setback for the C1 districts, except when a property abuts residentially zoned land. The business abuts 2 apartment complexes along Medford Road, and therefore the 30-foot side and rear setbacks are applicable. The property is currently non-conforming as it does not meet the 30-foot setbacks for both the side and rear property lines. A new 12-foot 6-inch by 7-foot 10-inch cooler will be installed to provide additional stocking area to an existing small stocking area. If you'll turn your attention to the monitors. The first slide is the location map. You'll see the highlighted parcel of the property. It's just south of East Stadium. And this is the location map of the property. The next slide is an aerial zoomed in photo. The proposed cooler will be in the back southwest corner, right where my cursor is. The next slide is the survey and site plan that was submitted by the applicant, and the proposed location of the cooler is right here. The rear yard variance of the 16 feet 9 inches will be along this side, and the 9-foot variance along the side is on this side right here. These are photos of the subject property when I was at the out at the site, and existing conditions. The proposed cooler will be right off the back of this wall right here. These are all just photos of the existing conditions in the rear of the property. These are the abutting property owners, the multifamily complex. You see the vegetation, the building in the background, and the fence that is dividing the two properties. This is a little bit further to the west, and additional wall and fencing between the two properties. And this is the back corner of the southwest corner, and then the cooler, proposed walk-in cooler will be in this area right here. And that's the side property line to the west, and that's the abutting multifamily complex. And this is taken from the southwest corner on the multifamily property, looking at Trader Joe's. And you see the approximately 10 to 12 foot tall fence wall right here on top of the concrete barrier. That is the end of my presentation, and I'll take questions at this time.
Thank you, John. Any questions for staff? No? All right, if the petitioner's here, if you could please step forward, state your name for the record, and sign in. You'll have 5 minutes.
The address, is that the company address where I'm from, I take it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Greenville, I assume?
Yeah, I'll start it when you're
Okay.
ready.
My name is Eric Beeman. I'm with Kripe Architects and Engineers. I am the architect for Trader Joe's on this project. Don Strack unfortunately had an emergency that he couldn't be here himself to present with me. But being familiar with the project, working on the drawings, I can explain it to you. The purpose of this was a request from the manager of the store to install this cooler exterior to the building. Our original survey had included providing the cooler on the inside of the store where we could, and then scrolling back to the survey drawings that we had provided. And being inside the stockroom space, there was a lot of wall space that was being used or wasted by a lot of openings. There was a lot of doorways that were blocking a lot of usable space along the walls. Usually with this type of installation, we would provide it within a corner of the space that would be less determinant for the store operations or their holding power. And the request that came from the manager to install the cooler was to increase their holding power that they don't currently have. A lot of new stores being built, like the one in Grand Rapids that has been built, and the one in Kalamazoo as well. Trader Joe's newer standard is to provide 3 types of cooler boxes. One being a beverage cooler, another one that holds dairy and meats, the next one being a freezer, and then the newest one being a produce cooler, which holds produce or lower temp items. And this one, since there was no room, again, in the stock room, we decided to try and place it outside of the building, then finding out about the setback requirements due to the residential zoning behind the building. The key factor of this was to increase their holding power, especially during the holiday seasons. If you guys have ever shopped at a Trader Joe's before, like any supermarket, it gets very hectic during the holiday seasons, and they usually try and hold twice as much product that they can, so less trucks come through the parking lot. There's a lot more tenants that are in that shopping center. So Trader Joe's, and I don't think any of them sell any other food products besides Trader Joe's. So them having more of a presence of their trucks coming in and out during the holiday season could be a determinant of parking requirements for the other tenants, trucks being in the way, trying to get to the loading dock space. This provides them to hold a little more power and a little more product that they need to during the year. And actually, that you could see in the picture that you had saw, they actually requested a temp cooler be placed in the back to get them through the holiday season there behind the truck. So this, and also the space in the back is already used as a somewhat haphazard storage for the most part, with the cooler being back there, the permanent cooler, not the temp cooler. This provides a little more purpose for that back, so that way it doesn't provide any space that could be haphazardly used as storage for cardboard bales or seasonal fixtures that they don't use in certain times of the year. The cooler is only 9.5 feet tall, and as John had mentioned, the fence is only 10.5 to 12 feet tall. So it would be clearly invisible from the residents that are behind and to the side of the building. There are no fans from the cooler, so it does not make any exhaust, any noise. And with it being behind the building, it doesn't really provide any sort of visual attraction to it whatsoever also. As far as construction, we're looking at probably around a 2 or 3 week time period for construction. And the system is all prefabricated panels, so there is very, very minimal cutting or sawing or any loud usage of equipment on site once they pour the concrete pad for it. A lot of the equipment that would be used is just for the concrete truck to come in and pour the pad, and then for another truck or trucks to come and deliver the actual panels for the cooler. And then it's all plug and play from that point. That concludes my presentation, if you guys have questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the petitioner? Mike?
So if this cooler gets built, all this haphazard storage that, as you refer to out here, the cardboard, the recycling bins, won't those just get moved further, closer to property lines and things? I mean, it's not like you're getting rid of the cardboard boxes, they have to go somewhere.
It potentially could move. I'm not a part of the store operations and this store in particular,
Fair.
but
All right, yep, got it.
it would be definitely something that I could mention to Don. Don would mention to the store captain that problem be resolved properly.
Cool.
Whether it be a more permanent solution, whether it be a storage unit or what that might be. Unfortunately, I can't speak on behalf of that
Sure,
for Don,
got
but
it.
it can be a word that I can pass on, definitely.
Thank you.
Dave?
Looking at this picture we have right now, the cooler would in fact be not where the boxes are, but behind where that truck is
Yes.
against the building.
Yes.
On the far side, there's some of the blue rolling recycle containers.
Mhm.
How are those picked up? Do you know?
That I believe, I don't know the delivery schedule or the pickup schedule for the recycling, so I imagine that whenever the truck does come, that,
And are those just wheeled out?
I believe they're just wheeled out.
Okay. So this new, okay, now the picture that we're looking at now, how far, so where that tarp is right now, the blue tarp,
Mhm.
that's where the cooler would be?
Yes, roughly.
And would it come out further than that?
I believe it was, I think it was 10 feet,
7 feet,
7 feet.
7 feet in width.
So it would probably be about that width, maybe a foot or two larger than that. And it would probably to the fence, looking at it scale-wise, it'd probably be about 6 feet left over between the screen wall and then the end of the cooler once it's installed, give or take.
That answers these questions. I have something off topic. Could we go back to the first lots, the size of the lots? There's a tremendous problem here with exiting and entering this lot. And in fact, I've been there when there's no parking. And
It's common of Trader
I
Joe's.
drive by
unfortunately.
there a lot, and I've seen some near accidents exiting this lot. As I look at this far extension to the east, and actually I walked it today, and it's abutting another parking lot. And I don't know, I think this would have to be approved by city traffic engineers potentially, because Manchester is a residential street. But Manchester also has a light at Washtenaw And if you could just tell your people that you work with at Trader Joe's that a solution for a serious traffic hazard issue might be to try to get right away through that adjacent parking lot. And then people could exit there to the left and to a light on Washtenaw in order to make safer egress, and especially at rush hour, I think would make a huge difference. I don't know what the traffic or what the accident record is out here, but I've seen some near accidents myself. But if I would just ask you, this isn't a zoning issue, but while you're here, if you could talk to the people at Trader Joe's and see if there might be a potential traffic solution by talking to the neighboring property owner.
Yeah, I can pass the word along. That unfortunately wouldn't be a Trader Joe's modification to the site.
That's the owner of the
That'd be the owner of the property, and I can talk to them about it.
But hopefully they want to keep Trader Joe's as a tenant, and they may be willing to do something to make Trader Joe's life easier and hopefully avoid any serious traffic accidents in the future.
Good, thank you.
So, can you talk a little bit about the noise? You kind of trailed off a little bit when you were talking about the noise of this. So there's not a fan?
No.
For exhaust, but then what about any sort of noise with the cooler?
The cooler itself, but not talking about the construction of the cooler. Once the cooler is fully installed, there is absolutely no noise as it relates to the cooler itself.
Okay.
There are some fans on the inside of it to keep it cold, but it's the paneling for the cooler system is an insulated panel system. So it's a foam core insulation for the most part. So any slight noise from those fans on the inside, you wouldn't be able to hear from the outside.
Question. The crew toilet that's shown on the inside of the space, is that a code requirement, or is that something?
That was a personal request of the captain as well, along with the cooler. The size of the store doesn't meet the need for a third restroom. It's mere convenience for the employees. As this store has 2 employee restrooms that meet the code. The third one is just for the employee convenience, so that way if they have to use the restroom, they're having to stand in line also.
Could that cooler go in that space by any chance?
There's actually, it's hard to see from the large plan, but there is a exit door that is located just south of that restroom addition. And the grade is actually probably 4 inches higher on the inside of the store compared to the grade at the outside. So there's also a 5-foot ramp that's, or 4-foot ramp on the inside of it. So the restroom addition that's in there right now is just at the very edge of the landing space for that ramp on the inside.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here from the public to speak on this? If so, please step forward, state your name for the record, and sign in. Step forward up here to the microphone, sir. You'll have 3 minutes.
I have a couple of questions. Should I sign? Okay. Okay, I live right behind them. And I wasn't very clear on, is the top of this thing going to be visible above the fence?
Yeah, Eric, you can come up and stand to the side if you'd like. Sir, could you state your name for the record as well, please?
William Levac?
Thank you.
So the height of the cooler, again, is only 9.5 feet, and the screen wall is about 10 feet itself, maybe a little taller than that.
So nothing will be visible?
You would not be able, if you were even standing away from the screen wall, you wouldn't be able to see the very top of it at all.
Okay, that's good, because the other one that's on the west side, you can see. And-
On this side here.
Yes, you can see right above it, there's the roof and 2 vents up there.
Okay.
And you could see that from the parking lot, so nobody really cares from the parking lot.
That, I wasn't a part of the original build of this store or the build out of this store, but my assumption is those are probably rooftop units that, it
Yeah.
looks like the city had required screening around as well.
Well, no, they did that because the old fence burned out.
Oh,
The corrugated cardboard they had stored there, someone apparently dropped a cigarette butt in it.
oh, I see.
On your, I'll mention also the crew toilet there. That's really a ridiculous place to put a toilet.
I agree, and as I mentioned about the inside layout of the stockroom itself,
Well, I was thinking over here in this corner, the lower left corner, right next to the break room with the entrance through the break room, and then you just put the shelves around the outside, because that corner of the store has nothing in it. It's empty space at this point.
probably with that I would see Trader Joe's, probably declining that location is that, it would reduce their projected sales area square footage. And even if there might not be anything in it, they might use it as a seasonal display. Perhaps
Yes.
in the fall time, they might,
But-
have a pumpkin display, or they sell tons of pumpkin products.
Okay. The other thing is, of course, that this is in the buffer area, and a toilet would be a very permanent fixture. Whereas all these units that you're talking about are removable, and the toilet would not be.
What might the question be?
Well, according to the code, you're not supposed to put permanent structures back there. And that would be extremely permanent. Even if you found a bigger place to go, that thing would still be there, and someone else would have to maintain it. I got one comment on his traffic thing. If you're going out to that junction of Manchester, there is heavy traffic there all the time from people in the subdivisions and everything. So it would just make a traffic situation much worse.
Thank you, sir. Did you was that all your questions? Were those all your questions?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else from the public to speak on this petition? Seeing no one, we did not receive any written communication on this, so we are in discussion. Todd?
Well, I started out being in 2 minds about this. Looking at the 5 criteria to approve it, one of them is that it has to be more than mere inconvenience or a higher financial return. And you could stretch it to meet this, but probably it doesn't meet that criteria. So that's one side. The other side, the cooler doesn't make any noise. Trader Joe's is already using the space. It's behind walls. No one will ever see it. Trader Joe's is already using the space, and it isn't going to impact anybody. And while it may not meet literally all 5 criteria, I can't really think in a practical sense why this should be denied. It just makes sense to do it. They're already using the space. Nobody's going to see it. So the way I am right now, I think I'm going to approve it.
Mike?
I'm gonna vote no on this. This seems pretty clearly self-imposed to me, and, I mean, it runs with the land, right? So who knows if it's Trader Joe's in 5 years or 10 years, or what would move in there and what they would use the space for, and so there's nothing weird about the property that would, to me, applying our criteria, cause me to vote for this, so I'm gonna vote no.
Kirk?
Thank you. This kind of reminds me of the Domino's petition in a way, not that anything we do is you know, is precedent setting, but it's an interesting discussion about the technologies that groceries require to provide their services. So it's a tough one for me. I believe I came out on the favorable side for Domino's. I know there was good discussion on the board about that. And even there, it had a visual impact and, you know, crowded the sidewalk and so on. But I think what's compelling to me in these cases is that I don't I mean, Trader Joe's has operated successfully in this location, and I assume that many grocers are having issues with storage and you know, keeping their stock fresh, especially, you know, in incidents like when there's increased snowfall and the trucks can't get through and then the people can't get food. So it's a compelling situation that I normally I would say is self-imposed, but in this case I find I'm more persuaded that it's becoming a necessity for these types of operations to stay in business, and you know, there isn't a lot of flexibility with this site, so I think I'm leaning toward it. With that, I wonder if I could just append a question to staff. It sounds as though, since we've had some neighbor questions, that a mailing went out, a postcard went out, and aside from who we've heard tonight, there hasn't been any other feedback.
That's correct. I did not receive any emails opposed or for the property. And didn't receive any communication.
Thank you.
Dave?
Just in reference to Kirk's bringing up the Domino's cooler, which I voted against because it was right to the side. We were giving them basically, you can build it right to the sidewalk. I thought that was inappropriate. This is fully the opposite. I'm going to vote for this. This is totally hidden behind the fence. It's area that's used. The site is, the reason it would be a zero setback, except it's next door to residential. This use of relatively reasonably priced groceries in close proximity to residences is an important kind of use for the neighborhood. And I see it as really a benefit to the residential neighbors that they have the capability to provide these groceries close at hand, really within easy walking distance. I strongly in support of this and totally see very much the difference between this and the Domino's, which was right on the front, right along Packard, right up to the sidewalk. This is nothing like that. It's very well hidden by that fence.
Mike?
For me, the way I distinguish the Domino's situation, this is with Domino's, to me, that property was unique in that to really run that business and have any kind of inside seating, to me, they needed that space. Here, they're running their business fine now, right? It's not like if Trader Joe's doesn't get this cooler, they're shutting down Trader Joe's. They found a way to run that Trader Joe's for years without the cooler. So that's how I'm personally distinguishing. I think Dave and Kirk make great points, and they're completely legitimate, but that's how I'm personally distinguishing it, those two.
Any other discussion or motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Dave.
Petition ZBA 18-001, 2398 East Stadium Boulevard. Variance, based on the following findings of fact and in accordance with the established standards for approval, the Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants the following variance, says from Chapter 55, Section 5:43, area, height, and placement regulations to allow a variance of 16 feet 9 inches from the rear setback and a 9-foot variance from the side setback in order to install a 98 square foot cooler at the rear of the property. The cooler is to be installed per the submitted plans. A, the alleged practical difficulties are peculiar to the property and result from conditions which do not exist generally throughout the city. B, that the practical difficulties which will result from a failure to grant the variance include substantially more than mere inconvenience, inability to attain a higher financial return, or both. C, the variance, if granted, will not significantly affect surrounding properties. D, the circumstances of the variance request are not self-imposed. E, the variance request is the minimum necessary to achieve reasonable use of the land or structure.
I have support. Support from Todd. Mike Daniel.
No.
Dave.
Yes.
Nicole.
No.
Todd.
Yes.
Julie.
No.
Kirk.
Yes.
Charlotte.
No.
I vote yes. We have a tie, so the request is denied. Moving on to petition ZBA 18-002-216 Buckholz Court. John.
ZBA case 18-002-216 Buckholz Court. Mitch Gashi, representing property owner David Greiner, is requesting permission to alter a nonconforming structure. The applicant is seeking to widen the existing dormer at the front of the residence from the current dimension of 13 feet in width to 26 feet 8 inches. The new construction will not encroach further into the existing front setback of 6 feet 4 inches. Currently, the subject parcel is zoned R1D single family and is located west of North 7th Street and West Park. The existing two-bedroom home consists of approximately 925 square feet and is situated on a lot containing 3,441 square feet. The home was built in 1910 and is 6 feet 3 inches from the front property line. The lot is non-conforming as it does not meet the 5,000 square foot minimum lot size for the R1D district. Additionally, the structure is non-conforming as it does not meet the district front setback of 25 feet and the average front setback established from the adjacent properties. If you'll turn your attention to the monitors. You see the location map and the parcel is highlighted, the subject property, just north of West Huron Street. The next slide is the aerial map. You see the subject property, West Park to the east, West Huron to the south, North 7th Street running just east of it. The next aerial or slide is the zoomed-in aerial photo. You see the subject property and its relative location to the front property line, the close proximity, and then the applicant's request to expand the existing dormer the length of the front of the house, but not encroaching any further than where it currently sits. The next slide is the survey that was submitted with the application by the petitioner, and in your packets you can see it better. It's showing up as showing the distance of just over 6 feet to the front property line. This is the foundation plan and the first floor plan as it currently sits. The second floor plan existing dormer, as you see right here. The next slide is the proposed second floor showing the width of the dormer being eliminated, going all the way across the front of the house, and you see the 2 bedrooms on the front. And you'll see some examples of the elevations of what the finished product will look like in the small pictures to your left. Here's some more elevations, the front elevation of what the home will look like. Let's see the whole dormer spanning from the entire length of the home. And then the left side elevation. And this is the street right out here on Buckholz to the right. This is a photo that was submitted by the applicant showing a proposed rendering of the porch, what the finished product of the porch will look like, an example of that. These are photos of the site as it currently sits when I made my inspection. You see the proximity of the home, and here's Buckholz Court, the street right here. The entire neighborhood, I will say, is very close in proximity. All the homes are adjacent to one another, as you can see on the aerial map too, and all the homes are very close to the road. More photos of the subject property, and you'll see that's the existing dormer to be expanded. You see the relationship of the properties along the same side of the street. To the north on the same side of the street. And these are the properties that directly across the street from the subject property. And that's the home across the street. I'll take any questions at this time.
Thanks, John. Any questions for staff? Dave?
I was there standing earlier today, and the existing structure lines up exactly with the structures, and your photo pretty much captured that. Doesn't that affect the average setback? So shouldn't the average setback requirement be shorter because of that?
It is.
But
the average
oh,
front
I see.
setback
They're
doesn't-
not asking for a variance. They're just asking for
Yes, sir. They're not encroaching any further, so they're just asking for an alteration.
an alteration of
Yep,
non-conforming
if they were going to
structure.
encroach 6 more inches forward to the street, then they need a variance.
Okay, I've got you. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Pardon me.
Okay, the petitioner's here. If you could please step forward, state your name for the record, and sign in.
My name is Mitch Gashi, and I'm here on behalf of David Greiner, who is also here at the meeting tonight. What we had petitioned for, when David bought the property early last year, we were under the understanding that the foundation had to be replaced. So I applied for a building permit, was granted a building permit to replace the foundation on the current structure at Buckholz. Unfortunately, in repairing, actually we completely replaced the foundation. We saw that there were some structural problems that was going to necessitate us removing that front dormer. So because when Mr. Buckholz, and it was Mr. Buckholz who built the house back in 1910, he worked for the University of Michigan, and he used scrap materials that he had garnered from various U of M buildings. So when we had to remove some of that material to put in the foundation, it became very apparent that we were going to have to take that front dormer off. And so I approached Mr. Greiner and said, maybe to better utilize the property and the house that's sitting on the property, why don't we look at putting 2 bedrooms up front instead of the single bedroom that's there, because we're going to remove it either way. So I went about drawing up blueprints, which have been submitted in your packet, and talked to John. Actually had several meetings with him as to what we needed to do. Went through that process. It is a non-conforming lot, but we are not going to go any further close to the road. It's just an alteration to the existing structure. It will enhance the value of all the homes on the street, because it'll now increase the value of Mr. Greiner's home by making it a 3-bedroom home instead of a 2-bedroom home. And 2-bedroom homes are a little more challenging value-wise in anywhere. They do have value in the city of Ann Arbor, but a 3-bedroom home is a better return on your investment, I guess. And Mr. Greiner agreed, so we submitted all the plans, and here we are tonight.
Thank you. Any questions for the petitioner? Nope. All right, thank you. Is there anyone here from the public to speak on this petition? If so, please step forward. Seeing no one, I'll note we did not receive any written communication on this petition, so we are in discussion. Dave?
First of all, I want to state that for me, increasing petitioner's return on investment is not a reason I would support any sort of a request like this. However, I am in favor of it. It's a very narrow court and a remnant of the neighborhood. All the houses on both sides of the street are set back very close to the court. The city has engineered it as a one-way court so that traffic can traverse, and there's no parking, of course, on the court. The fact that this doesn't encroach any further, it stays within exactly really the footprint of the structure, and it's merely alteration to a non-conforming structure, are all reasons that I can support this.
Any other discussion? Kirk?
Can I ask a question of staff?
Sure.
So can you just remind us all of when there's if we give an approval to alter a non-conforming structure, is it per submitted plans, or say they find more structural deficiencies and they decide to demo the house, would this then just give them a larger building envelope?
Well, since it's a non-conforming lot and it's only approximately, 4,000 square feet, they have it's a lot of records, so they have the by right ability to rebuild another home on it, but the envelope is so small that they would have to get variances to build a new structure anyway. It doesn't meet the district's front setback. It doesn't meet the average setback. They're not going any closer, and so it's going to be constructed per the submitted plans, and if they were to tear it down and rebuild it, they'd have to get variances. Because when you apply the front setback and the rear setback, it engulfs the entire width of the lot. So, but they can, by right, build another new house on it because it's a lot of record. They only could build single family. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you, just for the clarity and to remind us all. We've had a few of these applications, and again, not that it sets any precedent. I think, in these situations, especially where they've run into some structural problems, I think situations like this, even though we haven't gotten any negative neighbor feedback, I think when they do a renovation job like the one we're seeing renderings of, it is an enhancement to the neighborhood, and I think that these neighborhoods, even though they're so-called non-conforming, are a great value to the city, and I definitely support what they're planning to do here.
Usually our alterations come before us with multi-family situations and not a single family, but this one did because it doesn't meet either the district setback requirement or the average.
Got it. Thank you.
Any further discussion or motion?
I'll make the motion.
Dave?
Petition ZBA 18-002, 216 Buckholz Court. Permission to alter a non-conforming structure. Based on the following findings of fact and in accordance with the established standards for approval, the Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants permission to alter a non-conforming structure per submitted plans. A, the alteration complies as nearly as practicable with the requirements of the zoning chapter and will not have a detrimental effect on neighboring property.
Do I have support? Support from Nicole. Todd?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Charlotte?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mike?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
Request is granted. Moving on to ZBA 18-003, 2502 Packard Street. John?
All right, ZBA case 18-003, address is 2502 Packard. McKinley Incorporated, representing Packard Square LLC, is requesting two variances from Chapter 61, Section 5:502, subsections 2B, ground signs, to allow for a freestanding identification ground-mounted sign to be located 20 feet from the property line and 17 feet in height. The code requires a 17-foot tall sign to be a minimum of 34 feet from the property line. The subject parcel is zoned C1B, Community Convenience Center, and will be a mixed-use development with approximately 23,500 square feet of retail space, 249 apartment units, and 460 parking spaces. Previously, the property applied for a sign variance in June of 2016, which was ZBA case 16-015. That request, which was denied, was to locate a 10-foot sign 2 feet from the front property line. The new sign dimensions will be a 10-foot by 8-foot 4-inch cabinet affixed to a 7-foot base. If you'll turn your attention to the monitors. The first slide is the location map. I think everyone's familiar with the property. It's now called the George, formerly Packard Square. It's the highlighted parcel right here, just west of Packard. The next slide is the aerial map of the property and surrounding properties and neighborhoods. Next slide is a zoomed-in aerial of the property. We all know it looks much different today. These are the most recent aerial photos, though. These are photos that were submitted by the applicant. You see they're showing the proposed sign location, and it is to the left. You'll see other photos as well of the sidewalk, and you see the proximity to the street of Packard and the sidewalk. Existing conditions within the interior of the site, more photos that were submitted by the applicant. This is the survey/site plan that was submitted, and you see the proposed sign location. It's down in the parking lot. It's within the interior of the parking lot, and there is a designated location you'll see in the future photos here. This is a rendering of the proposed sign. You see it down in the parking lot. This is the sidewalk, giving you scale and perspective. Here's a rendering of what the sign will look like. 17 feet in height, excuse me, with the 7-foot base and then the 10-foot tall sign. Disregard that photo. Here are the photos I took at the site when I was there. Standing up on the sidewalk looking down, this is within the interior of the lot, and this is the proposed location for the sign. Interior of the site, how it exists. This is from where the sign will be located and looking up the street, up at the, you see the vehicle going down Packard. The sidewalk's just on the other side of the railings to give it some perspective from within the site. Just another photo of the area. And that's all I have at this time. I'll take questions.
Thank you, John. Any questions for staff? All right, if the petitioner's here, if you could please state your name for the record and sign in. You'll have 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Van Volkenberg of McKinley Inc. Just to clarify, McKinley is the receiver for Packard Square LLC. We were appointed by the court November 1st, 2016. So just to clarify, we are doing this on behalf of the receivership. At this point, I would like to open up for questions and have the time, because I'm sure there's questions about the site and everything going on in the site. I think the pictures speak quite a bit for the property. The property itself, we are rebranding, and with that, we would like to have the identity of the George predominantly placed at the front of the building. This was actually permitted by the city on October 12th, 2016. It was actually a larger sign than this that said Packard Square. But unfortunately, because we took over as receiver, like 17 days later, the time frame, there's, I believe, 180 days by the time we wrapped our hands around the property and were able to move forward with the property. When we went to reapply for the permit, thinking it would be very black and white and easy to do, we got notified that this is actually not in the code. So we have since applied for this variance.
Thank you. Any questions for the petitioner? Todd?
So how long has it been since the old Kroger's was torn down? Is it 10 years? I mean,
You know-
finally, I mean, this is, I realize not out of talk, but finally, something's being done to this space. I mean, it was just ugly for years.
Yes.
And that just leaves Lower Town. But stuff is happening on that.
And
So-
I-
So it's nice to see something's happening.
And I will say McKinley is moving very steadily along. We've been working with the city of Ann Arbor and hope to have a temporary C of O next month for a portion of the property, so we'll be able to start having residents actually move in.
I do actually have one more question, a little more on point. So of course, the property slopes down, it's clear from the photos, that's what it was like when Kroger was there. So if you were to draw a line of that, there was one photo showing a little man, a little tree, it's what, 7 feet up to the street level, so it dips down quite a bit, is that right? Is that my number right, 7 feet?
Correct.
Thank you.
And if the elevation did not change, we would be within the code.
Yeah, so it's really a 10-foot sign, but you have to
With-
have 7
with-
feet to equalize the level.
Correct, with the base, so that way it can be visible from the street.
Right, understood.
And if anything, because we're rebranding, though we are trying to promote it and it will continue, the George is a new name. Everybody knows Packard Square, but not the George. So if you're living there and you're having Domino's, which you brought up, deliver, they might not know where the George is, even if you give them the address, because it's so new and the location has been kind of off the map for so long, that the signage as well for emergency vehicles, as well as the residents, will help them know where to come. And then, once there is retail there as well, you'll know that they're located at the George.
Nicole?
So I see in the section that we're looking at here, it's noted that there's a masonry pedestal, is that correct?
Correct, so it'll be a concrete base on top, and then the actual lit sign
But
on
will
top
it
of
be
it.
like a brick or masonry, or will it just be concrete?
Just a masonry concrete, correct, right on top of it. If you look at yeah, that's a good one to show you. That's
So it
exactly
will
how it's
be-
gonna look like.
So when you look at it, you'll see concrete?
No, there will be, if you go back to the other picture, there's going to be a berm. That's what the tree-like things around it. There will be a berm surrounding the whole thing. So if you park right next to it, all you're going to see is, you'll see the berm, the landscaping. You will not see just concrete right there.
Okay, I have a couple more questions.
Go ahead.
So you mentioned the address, and I don't see the address on the sign. Is that,
The address will be on the sides of the building, actually, so when you're coming, you will see the number, but this is more an identifier for the name.
and then one more question, where is the retail signage, or is there any?
There is no retail signage, no. It will be on, the way the initial proposed plans are right now is they would be in the front of the building. If you look at the building, it is in a U shape, so you would be able to see all the retail signage around. It would be on the areas there, if you see. That would be where the proposed signage would go at a future date.
Kirk?
Thanks for all these helpful answers, and, you know, of course, I think many of us are glad that this is moving forward and that McKinley's managing it. So aside from that, so this sign is to brand the property, is that the primary function?
It's not just a brand, it's to provide an identifier for the property. So that way you will see it, you will know from oncoming traffic in either way, oh, this is where it is. Because there are two entrances, so if you don't see the number, or you do see the number but you miss the turn-in, then you can keep going, or you see the sign and then you could come on the other side. And this you could see from the road, so you wouldn't, you would be more, you'd more likely to turn in if you saw the sign, because the numbers will not be illuminated on the side of the building. So this is the only illuminated in visibility unless you're standing in front of the building itself, sign.
And will there be retail signage on the ends of the U facing, that are very close up to the sidewalk?
No, not the ones that are shown right now, no, there's no retail there. That's
Just
all
in the
residential.
middle of the U, towards
Just
the
in the
back.
middle, right, towards the setback where the landscaping and the drive around is there. If you look on the other photos, they show you, you can see like where the retail glass and the doors are, and that's where the retail will be, just in those areas. It's 6 retail on each side, so 12 total.
And are you expecting a lot of automobile traffic for people living outside of Ann Arbor, or do you think this is mostly serving residents in Ann Arbor?
Potentially, these are luxury apartments. There could be out-of-town people that are looking for apartments that might be coming in that area. Maybe if you're at the university and you're not familiar with the rest of the city in Ann Arbor and you're looking for something, or if you're relocating, if you're an employer or employee relocating to Ann Arbor, you might not be familiar with the area there. Again, also, though, I will say the rebranding does assist in that regard as
Okay.
well.
And last question, and I'll follow up with staff on this after everybody's asked you questions. So you're saying that it was your impression that a larger sign in this location was already approved?
Correct. I have a sign permit that we had that was dated October 12th, 2016, and it was for a sign that was 10 by 10. So this is 10 by 8, so it's not as large, but on the same pedestal and everything that was approved then, which is why we had gone forward. If you look, there's electrical already built there and everything, because we were under the assumption it was approved.
Okay, thank you.
Dave?
I'm at a loss that this was already approved in 2016 because I don't recall seeing this, other than the one that we denied.
I will clarify, there was a building permit that was approved in error, and then it was never issued, and then that's why they came initially for the first variance.
Okay. And then the receiver, so you're saying that you relied on that never approved building permit? So it wasn't approved, or it was?
It was approved, and then it was retracted in error. It was
Okay.
previous staff approved it.
So the receivership, the way it worked is now that McKinley is the managing partner of the new partnership?
No. McKinley is appointed by the court.
Okay.
And we're operating as an officer of the court on behalf of the property because of the default of the property owner with the construction loan that was on there.
Okay, and
So we are a nonpartisan third party operating on behalf of
And
the
I'm seeing
court.
2 different LLCs as owners. Is there a new ownership structure?
No, the ownership is still Packard Square LLC.
Okay.
The receivership order, which I believe was part of your packet.
Yes, I was looking through it, but I'm not a lawyer.
Allows, no, I understand, but neither am I. But it allows for McKinley to operate almost like an owner with all the authority of an ownership on their behalf.
On
And-
the debtors, on the creditors' behalf?
No, on the borrower's behalf. Well, we're not, I mean, we're on the court's behalf. I don't. This is a receiver's attorney. I brought him
Okay.
just to help clarify, so you might be able to help.
Good evening. My name is Jim Fink. I represent McKinley. And Mr. DeVardi, if you could ask the question again, I'll try to answer it.
I'm trying to get, so you're saying that, oh, we thought the sign could be here, and raising the issue of it was this transfer of ownership or receivership or management, and I'm just trying to get at was there a transfer of ownership? Are you managing on behalf of creditors who weren't paid back, or
I'll give you as short an answer as I can, but both Candace and Kirk know that it's not really one of my strong suits. So when a receiver is appointed, in this case, because of a default in the loan documents, the court says, McKinley, you take this project over.
Right.
And you operate in the best interest as a fiduciary, is the word we use, for the lender, for the debtor, property owner, and for all of the lien claimants, the people that are still owed money from the work that was done before. So McKinley's job is to complete the project, and then either the owner refinances and pays everyone off, or the property gets sold. But McKinley stands in the shoes of Packard Square. And so in this case, receiving documents from Packard Square, the owner, they had the signed permit that was issued and went forward and
Gotcha.
and then discovered that, one, it was expired, and two,
Okay.
it was issued in error. And Mr. Barrett's right, he had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, he certainly did, and he's been very helpful, I will say, in us working through all this. And the reason that there was such a delay is the determination was made to do the rebranding and everything, and so
Sure.
that delayed. So when we finally went to apply for the permit is when this was brought to our attention.
So in your management capacity, does that run until the court says the obligations are met and then turns it over to
To whoever. is
whoever,
next.
either the debtor or the,
If the property was sold, then it would
Right.
be turned over to the new owner.
Okay.
If it was redeemed, it would go back to Packard Square.
and then, do you see this as, you said luxury apartments, are they rentals or condos?
They are apartments. They are rental
Apartments?
units. Yes.
Are you envisioning short-term rentals at all?
There are 3, 2, 1 bedrooms as well as studios, so I think we're going to see a mix because of that. I think with the larger bedrooms, there may be more of a long-term stay, but we do believe that we'll get some students, so it may turn over a little.
He
I'm
says short-term.
I'm saying short-term in terms of you're seeing more and more of these Airbnb rental operations?
Oh, no, this
that
would
are-
be a one-year lease, like
Okay.
a standard rental
Okay.
agreement.
That's.
Sorry, I apologize.
That's okay. That's the extent of my questions here, and then I have some statements that I was on the site today with my tape measure, and I'll have some sense that I want to share with the rest of the board. And, but I also have some questions about the gross signage allowed in this, which I'll direct to the staff person after we're done.
Any other questions for the petitioner?
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this petition? If so, please step forward, state your name for the record, and sign in. I will note that we received correspondence from 1485 King George Boulevard in opposition to the request for a variance. All right, we're in discussion. Dave?
Just a question for John Barrett. If we approve this, what kind of effect does it have on the gross square footage of signage allowed on the site? And what is the maximum amount of on-building signage that could happen in addition to this?
Well, there's two different types of signage. There's going to be the multifamily residential signage,
Right.
and then there's the commercial business signage. So each commercial tenant will be allowed 2 square feet of signage for every linear foot of building frontage or business frontage that they have. So let's say these spaces average 25 feet in width, they'll be allowed 50 square feet of signage. I don't think they're going to have that much, but they're probably going to have a inset that you see at maybe like every mall or interiors of malls, and they're going to be set in there.
Right.
I will say that this is a much less obtrusive request as the last time. If you remember the last time, it was going to be a 10-foot tall sign,
Right.
2 feet from the property line, approximately 90% of the variance request. This one is a taller sign, but it's going to be set back 20 feet from the property line, and it's requesting about 58% of the front setback variance. So,
Yeah, I was just going to share with the rest of the board. When I was there today, I did measure a 7-foot difference from the base of where the sign will be located to where the sidewalk is. And given that, the podium that'll be on brings it up to really the site. The building itself on the north end is set back 10 feet from the sidewalk. On the south end, it's set back only 9 feet from the sidewalk. And what they're requesting is set back 20 feet. I look at it as essentially the sign itself as a 10 square foot sign, 20 feet set back, as in compliance. If you take away that 7-foot podium, or the 7 foot that elevates it up. And it is set back 10 feet further back into the parking lot than the actual building is. So my reading, correct me if I'm wrong, is if it weren't for that 7 foot that they have to elevate it, that it would be essentially in compliance?
Correct, but as
Okay.
you know, we have to measure the sign at grade, and so that's what we're faced with.
Right.
On this drawing, I will point out, you see this line right here, just this, the bold line, it says right-of-way line.
Right.
And you see the measurement from there to the sign, it is 20 feet,
Right.
so.
With all those questions answered, I can't see any reason to, I support this.
Kirk?
Thank you. You mentioned that this application was retracted, the permit was retracted? Is that correct for this sign?
It was never issued, not for this one. The one in 16 was never issued. And I kind of want to leave that alone and deal with what we've gotten before us tonight. But it was not issued, it was approved.
Approved, but not,
And it was
it was
approved,
not
and it was
exercised.
approved in error, and it was never issued.
Okay. I'm just trying to,
Yep.
because there was some mention of, you know, they're anticipating X, Y, and Z, if that plays any part of it. So if they created a dirt berm here and placed the sign on it, it would be a different application? I mean, is that sort of getting at what?
That would be really skirting the spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance, and I've been handed that situation previously with fences.
Right.
And so as the zoning administrator, I've made the call that you've created that situation.
Sure.
And so I'm going to go at the average grade surrounding the structure.
Got it. Okay.
So if they were to build a berm here,
Okay.
I would be forced to make an administrative decision.
Right, I'm half joking with that. So, in the future, however, just to clarify, they couldn't say, well, we're not going to have the concrete podium, and we're just going to make a multi-tenant sign below what's being used as signage now. In other words, they wouldn't be able to convert that base into a sign, is that correct?
No, that's, this sign right here is going to probably take up all of their allotted square footage for signage that they're allowed. So if they wanted to get additional signage panels on that base, they would not be allowed to without a variance. But I don't think they'd put panels on this base. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so, but right now, we're approving a sign that effectively takes up the podium and the lighted part. Is that what I'm understanding correctly? Like, is the base actually being counted as sign allowance right now?
No.
No.
The sign allowance is the George.
It's just the
yeah.
lighted part.
The base is just contributing to the overall height of the sign,
Understood, okay.
which requires it to be the additional 2 feet back for every foot in height.
Got it. And that is the design that we're approving, or can that could be anything?
I would prefer it to be per the submitted plans, yes. I think this is what the applicant has spent a lot of time in studying on, so I think that's what they're proposing.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So just real quick, I'm going to piggyback onto that.
Okay.
So let's say 10 years from now, when everyone knows what the George is, and that branding is maybe not as important, could they swap out the face of that sign and make it 12 individual little narrow retail signs
They
that
could,
encompass that
because
same
it
sign
wouldn't be
area?
increasing the overall square footage. So
Would they need a permit for that, or is that
they
just
would need a
considered?
permit, yep, because they're gonna do a reface. Anytime you do a reface, swap out a cabinet or a reface, they would require a building permit or sign permit, yes.
Okay.
But if they were to just take those panels out and put 10 little small panels of different retailers in there, they'd be allowed to do that because they'd be within their square footage allowance.
Okay, thanks. Todd?
Yeah, I think this is a very easy one for me, and I think Dave DeVarty hit it exactly on point. It's essentially a 10-foot sign, and they're 20 feet back from the property, and it's only because of the weird dip in the road, which is a question I asked of Jennifer, and I didn't really catch her last name. So if it weren't for the strange shape of the land, they wouldn't even need to be here. So I'm voting yes for this.
Dave?
I do want to make a statement for the record in support of Domino's pizza drivers or any pizza delivery drivers. I was a pizza delivery driver for over a year in the early 1970s, and they know the addresses. And the people that stop at a gas station to get directions are making a mistake. They should stop at a pizza place if they're lost and ask the delivery drivers for directions. And so I'm not worried about pizza delivery drivers finding their way to this place.
Kirk?
For the record, I guess I'm not concerned about anybody not finding directions, given the pervasiveness of, driving apps, but separate from that. So if this were to come back redesigned, Mr. Barrett, just to piggyback further, would that just be an administrative approval if they wanted to change it into a multi-tenant, traditional suburban-looking landmark sign?
As long as it met the requirements of the code, then I could approve it as such. But if there's any deviation in height or location or additional square footage, then it would possibly not be able to be permitted.
And in order to meet code in the place that is being proposed, with the height of the podium that is being proposed, can you help me with the math there? How big could this be?
Well, it's allowed to be 17 feet in height because it's going to be, or if the variance is approved, it's going to be 20 feet.
So say the variance weren't approved,
Then it would have to be 34 feet behind the property line, additional 14 feet back from where it is proposed now.
Okay, to have any width at this height, that is the distance away from the road it would have to be.
Correct. 17 feet requires 34-foot of distance from the property line.
And do you feel like that's an option that's been explored?
I said it's less obtrusive than the last request, so.
Relative to the last one, I agree, yeah.
Yes.
If only we made decisions on relativity. Because it looks like there is vegetated area, I haven't visited this site very recently, but there is area. It's not all parking lot. It's feasible for this to be located in a different spot, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I believe, the applicant has stated that they've installed the infrastructure for the sign for this location. I believe looks like there's some electrical conduit there, and I think this tongue, if you would accept that term, into the parking lot area is specifically for that. So I don't know if there would be another location, because it would just, if you were to get it outside of that parking lot, on the other two sides of the lot near the entrances, it would be buried behind the building. So to the north or south of the property, I don't think would be a good location. And as far as I can see walking the site, this looks like the most acceptable location, I would say.
And they could, in theory, they could use area on the ends of the U shape to brand their residential
They
site.
could put it on the building, yes.
Yeah, I guess I'm struggling between what seems to be
Freestanding sign versus a wall sign? Yeah.
So, I guess just wrapping up what I've heard so far, I'm struggling a bit because it looks like some decisions on electrical and other infrastructure were made based on a erroneously issued / approved permit on one hand. On the other hand, there are other options that comply with the ordinance, so that's making it difficult for me, you know. And the fact that this could be refaced with something that is a lot more suburban style and aesthetically runs afoul of the direction that the city's trying to go in. So I'm torn on this. Thanks.
Dave?
First of all, with consideration to my colleague Kirk, I understand your issues with this. Can you go back to that electrical tail there? When I measured this, where the electrical is not 20 feet. So they're going to have to run 20 feet. It's going to have to come out further towards the end of that little island.
See where the, this island starts right here and the location is back here.
Okay, I see that, but the electrical is up front here.
It's
So you're
probably,
just
it's
going to
probably
have to
gonna be
rerun
buried
that.
in the ground.
Okay. And to Kirk, for those that want to think along the lines Kirk is talking about, if you could go into those parking lot photos. Okay, so there you've got this bigger island area, which is,
You're talking about back here?
yeah,
Okay.
which is another area that you could put that sign. And for those on the board who are swayed by Kirk's argument, there is space there for the sign. I still feel as though this meets the spirit of the law, because it's got that big drop there, and that podium is just bringing it up to the street level. So I will continue to vote for it, but I totally understand where Kirk is coming from and want to point out that there are options for those of you that agree with Kirk.
Any other discussion or motion?
I'll make a motion.
Dave?
Petition ZBA 18-003, 2502 Packard Street, Chapter 61 variance. Based on the following findings of fact and in accordance with the established standards for approval, the Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants 2 variances from Chapter 61, Section 5:502, 2B, ground signs, to allow a 17-foot tall sign to be installed 20 feet from the property line. Can I add per submitted plan?
You
To that?
may. Yes, you may.
Okay. A, that the alleged hardships or practical difficulties or both are peculiar to the property of the person requesting the variance and result from conditions which do not exist generally throughout the city. B, that allowing the variance will result in substantial justice being done considering the public benefits intended to be secured by this chapter, the individual hardships that will be suffered by a failure of the board to grant a variance, and the rights of others whose property would be affected by the allowance of the variance.
Have a motion, do I have support? Support from Todd. Nicole?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Charlotte?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mike?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
The request is granted. Moving on to ZBA 18-004-440 Highland Road. John?
The next case this evening, ZBA case 18-004, address 440 Highland Road. Rockman Design Build, representing property owners, is requesting a 25-foot variance from Chapter 55 zoning, Section 5:27, area height and placement regulations, in order to construct a detached carport in the required front setback. The ordinance requires a 30-foot setback for structures in the R1B residential district. The property is zoned R1B, single-family residential, and is located north of Geddes Avenue. The home was built in 1920 and is approximately 2,310 square feet in size. The applicant is seeking to construct an 18-foot by 20-foot detached carport in the front setback. The new carport will have a covered walkway connecting to a screen porch at the rear of the residence. A new single-story addition will be added to the rear corner of the home on the carport side of the property. The addition, covered walkway, and rear porch will all be located in the side yard and will meet the side setback requirement of 5 feet. If you'll turn your attention to the monitors, you see the highlighted parcel. Here is Geddes Avenue, just north off Highland. You see the location of the property. The next slide is the aerial photo of the property, neighborhood, surrounding conditions. The next slide is the zoomed-in aerial photo. You see here it's along Highland Road, and then Highland Lane comes on the back side. And this is why we have a double front setback off both sides of the street. And you see this property line right here with the street right away. The front setback ends at that point and bisects across the property line, and all along here starts the side property line. So from this cone shape forward, all that is in the front setback. And the applicant is proposing to build the accessory detached carport off this driveway area in that front setback. This is the site plan that was submitted with the application, and as you can see what I've previously described, here is the carport. That's all in the front setback. You see the front setback line right here to the right of it, and then on the other side it covers all right in here. The property line, if you bisect, the right-of-way comes right to there. The addition and the covered walkways and the screen porch are all right in here. Will be outside of the 5-foot required side yard setback, so those are all in compliance. It's just the detached carport being 5 feet off the side property line, or the front property line, excuse me. This is a floor plan that was submitted with the application. You see the carport right up here, covered walkways coming down into the screen porch area, and the addition right here. Photos that were submitted by the applicant with the application. Here are renderings of the finished product, and you see the carport, covered carport right here, and then the covered walkways. The addition is right here, covered walkways into the screened-in porch area. A 3D view of the proposed screen porch, and view from the carport from the street. More photos that were submitted with the application. This is view from the street, and the carport would be in this area at the end of the driveway. This is view along the left front property line. And then you have a view from the house in the backyard, and you see the neighbor's property right here and the fence that divides the two properties. This is a view of the proposed view of the southwest area of the proposed carport location. These are the photos that I took when I made the inspection of the property, subject house from the street, the driveway, and the proposed carport in this area. More views of the proposed area of construction. This is the area, you see the delineation between the two properties. This is the rear of the house. And this is from looking between the two, and you see the courtyard, the cul-de-sac, excuse me, of Highland on the other side. Dividing barrier vegetation between the two properties. And this is the view from the cul-de-sac and the neighbor's home adjacent, and you see the fence. I'll take questions at this time.
Thanks, John. Any questions for staff? I just have a quick question. So
Yes.
it's a detached carport.
Correct.
Even though it's connected to the main structure via the covered walkway, the roofing, it's still considered a
Well-
detached structure? Is that?
It's detached because it's not connected by a common load-bearing wall or an enclosed area.
Okay.
It's just a roof line.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. If the petitioner's here, if you could please step forward, state your name for the record, and sign in.
Hi, my name is Susan. I work for Rockman Design Build, and I'm speaking to you on behalf of the homeowner who is here if you have questions that I can't answer. This house was built in 1920, prior to the land subdivision, which was approximately 1923. And then by aerial views, I believe that the Highland Lane behind them was added sometime between 1940 and 1960. The home was bought by the homeowners currently in 1992, so they've lived there for 26 years. They've raised their family there, and they'd like to stay there and age in place if possible. The proposed carport is intended to be at the location of the existing driveway that goes down to the garage, which is below the house. And because it's below the house, the driveway is cut, as you saw, down towards the foundation, which funnels water to that spot. We're requesting the variance in the second front setback that's due to the Highland Lane in order to create a safe travel path for the homeowners from their normal parking spot in the driveway up to their main entrance, not the front door, but the main entrance that they use all the time. As well as to remedy the water issues that they have going down into this lower entry at which was a garage. The carport that we are proposing is designed to complement the style of the house, the beautiful little Tudor cottage. We are going to match materials and the styling of it. And the storage areas that we've created for trash and recycling is going to be concealed from Highland Road, the main sort of road that goes past this house. So that's what I have for you. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions for the petitioner? Dave?
John, could you pull up the picture of the existing garage? That there was an actual photo there. Okay, so this existing garage does that go into the basement,
It does go into the basement,
essentially?
yes.
And are you proposing that you're going to backfill this area?
We are going to backfill the driveway area up.
Up
so
to the
that-
house, so you're going to reface this as foundation wall or something?
That
Or brick wall.
little addition was not constructed very well, and so it is crumbling. So our intention is to remove that little bump on the lower level, and we're going to add out some square footage for their bedroom so that they can.
Oh, I see. And
So-
that's that closet that I saw?
Correct.
Okay.
And then that way we'll fill in where the grade is cut down to that area and bring it up a little bit more so that they have more of a straight path going to the back door.
So that closet that are on your floor plans, there'll be basement under that?
There will be
That'll be
basement under
addition to the
that.
basement with new basement walls, basically?
Yes,
And then backfill up to that?
yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
If there's anyone else here to speak on this petition, please step forward, state your name for the record. I will note we did receive some communication. This is from the residents at 431 Highland Road. Looks like they are in opposition to the appeal. There's a letter of support from the residents at 5 Highland Lane. And then a letter of objection. There's not an address from Mr. Robert Eckstein. With that, That said, we are in this discussion. Julie?
So, I can see where this is a difficult site, but I guess when I look at it, it seems that using the second front setback for this spot is maybe not as ideal as using the first front setback, since it is just so close to the neighboring areas, and I'm kind of wondering if, I don't know if I really have a question, but it just seems like it's really put to the farthest side, and really, if it was sort of in the middle, I would have an easier time with it. John, do you?
If it was in the middle, it's gonna need a variance either way. The
Right.
entire area from where I'm sliding my cursor across to that point is all front setback.
Right.
The two front setbacks overlap one another, so any type of structure in that area is gonna require a variance.
But it's not different from this variance, right? I mean, it would be the same,
Well-
but not as close to the neighbors. Like, if they were to pull that
Right.
carport over, it would
Closer to the
require.
road, it would just require a variance from
The
the
other
other
side.
setback.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think that, for me, this is so jammed in next to the neighbors when there's actually quite a lot of space on the other side, and that gives me pause, I guess, from my perspective.
Dave?
Maybe this is a question for the architect. The garage that we see here as close to Highland Lane, if it moves over to be even with the setback from Highland Road, we gain several feet of additional space on the other side. Do you see what I'm saying? Just move it over so it touches the 30-foot setback from Highland Road?
You're saying from this area right here?
Correct. If you just took that structure and slid it over to where the front setback is, you're still need to ask for a variance on that side, the Highland Lane side, but not as great a variance. So the same structure could be built, really slid over a little bit. I mean,
It's more of a question for the architect, but
Yeah.
they may be able to slide it over 5 more feet, but I'm not sure. I'll let the architect speak on that.
We actually looked at it, kind of oriented and angled in different locations. We felt like this was the best location for a few reasons. One, the impact with proximity to the property line was closest to a cul-de-sac, and so we kind of felt like that was less of an eyesore, that people at the cul-de-sac weren't, they're driving in and out there, but as opposed to being closer to the residential areas on the other side of Highland Road. The other thing is that because the entrance that they use 90% of the time is at the back of the house, that this would be a shorter travel distance for them, and it simplifies roof lines. So it was more of a design thing as far as aesthetics. And also, the driveway that's existing, we're hoping to not completely redo the entire driveway. So we were utilizing that.
The communication that staff received also was, that was in support of the project, was the adjacent neighbor.
Adjacent on
Right
Highland
here.
Lane?
Yes.
Yes, the letter of support came from the resident at 5 Highland Lane, which is that house immediately adjacent.
And if you were to move that garage more towards Highland Road, it would change that driveway radius turning angle as well.
Kirk?
I think it's always worth restating that, we like the fact that people are renovating their homes and want to stay in the community and, try to make accommodations for however that can happen. I guess couple of the rationales in the report for why this is unusual include things such as an irregularly shaped lot, and, you know, with respect to, this was pointed out in some of the feedback we received, and also just looking at the parcel map, it's pretty regular that you have irregular lots in this neighborhood, and so that's giving me a bit of pause. There are several neighbors here with, because the streets are so curvy that people are dealing with lots of corner lots and restrictive setbacks. So given that it's not unusual, and the fact that, you know, there are neighbors who take exception to granting a variance just based on lot configuration, that's giving me some pause. You know, it's an old home, it's a beautiful home, and it clearly needs a solution for an automobile. I just, I guess I'd look for some feedback from my colleagues as to whether they think this is the only possible remedy for that.
Todd?
You know, Kirk, picking up on what you said, I'm also hesitant about this project, that certainly they've been there since 1992. It's always been like this. They're obviously, whether they use the garage or not, there's a garage there. They're planning on demolishing it, and they want to expand their bedroom, but alternatively, they could demolish the garage and build a better garage for their car. I know we've had the issue come up before about a covered walkway, so there's not ice going to the main entrance. I can't really remember how I voted on that one, but in thinking about that again, I don't know if that's enough to say that it's a substantial hardship. I mean, wear microspikes, I mean, that sounds flippant, but I don't know that that's enough to say that they should get the variance. At this point, I'm leaning against approving it. But like Kirk, I would like to know what other folks on the ZBA are thinking.
Is there time for me to speak as well? Come with your
So we're in
I think we
discussion.
jumped ahead.
Yeah, we're in discussion, sorry. John, I have a quick question. So right now, the carport it's essentially open, it has a wall on one side. If
There
this,
is no carport. There's nothing there.
well, the proposed carport,
Okay.
if the variance is granted, is there anything that would prohibit them from coming back and enclosing that carport space and converting it into a full-on garage?
No, the structure really, whether it's an enclosed carport or an enclosed garage, is really not what's at the center of the variance. Doesn't matter whether it's closed or enclosed. They can seek a garage that's enclosed. I remain neutral at all these, and I do my best to. I will say, in my 17 years, I think this situation is extremely unique. It's a very odd-shaped lot. Me and several planners wrestled over this one. You could apply the setbacks in a couple different ways. I think we applied it correctly to the ordinance, but it was a struggle. To apply 2 front setbacks to this lot and render, over 50% of it unbuildable. The uniqueness of the cul-de-sac adjacent to it, there's some sloping topography. So it was, I think it is a unique situation. That's how I'll say that.
Dave?
This is a tough one for me, but the site is buildable, and the additions they're proposing, other than the carport, or it could be an enclosed garage, are within the existing setback, side setback there. So those they don't even need a variance for. They can go ahead and do improvements and solve their drainage issues. They'll just have to have uncovered parking. I don't see a hardship here. There are plenty of people in town that have uncovered parking, including me. So I'm just not seeing the hardship that would say we should grant a variance to have this covered or potentially even enclosed carport when we have neighborhood opposition. If the, you know, I might come down differently if there was universal neighborhood support, but there isn't. So it's a tough one for me. I think I'm gonna have to vote against it, though.
Candace, first a word. Maybe I've missed something, but have we had all the comments from the public on this? Or are we getting, we did? Okay.
Yeah, there was no one here
I thought
that
a
spoke.
gentleman,
and
a gentleman stood up wanting to make another point. or-
That was after the public hearing was closed.
Thank you, got it, thank you.
Julie?
So, and maybe this is a question for staff. I see where it has the walk-in closet. How much space, so is it like 8 feet that's out, it looks like the closet addition is in a buildable area, and that goes up, like, is that,
This addition right here?
yeah.
Okay, yep.
And so that's, looks like the closet is 6 feet, and then there's maybe a little bit of extra between the end of that and the start of the line, the setback line. I mean, how much space is there to build from the side of the house to the setback line?
Well, I'm not sure if it was dimensioned, but from right here, the existing house out to that setback line,
Like
I'm guessing it's no more than 8
8
feet.
feet?
Kirk?
I guess further clarification for staff, kind of piggybacking on Commissioner Weatherby's comment. So are we looking at basically a swap for the existing garage for a walk-in closet?
No. There are two, you've got the carport right here, where you see on the monitor where my cursor is,
Right,
and then this is an addition.
right.
And then
That's where that addition is where the existing garage is? Am I-
Correct.
Well,
Okay.
actually, the existing garage is underneath. the
Yes,
existing
it's,
Can I clarify
That-
something about the basement garage? That I think
that-
is not understood
may-
clearly.
maybe we can have the.
I guess,
the architect.
maybe this line of questioning might clarify, if I can just keep on with John. So, perhaps what was being pursued here is that if you, like, extended out the box that is now being shown as walk-in closet on the floor plan, all the way to the setback line, that is adequate for car storage.
It's probably not deep enough.
Potentially.
if it's
Potentially, that's buildable area outside of the front setback, yes.
Okay. I guess that's one area, you know,
You're looking for alternatives?
well, I mean, the criteria that has to follow is the minimum variance making possible a reasonable use of the land. So that's you know, I hear, I think the objection to the fact that this is a very irregularly shaped lot, I guess I could go either way on. I'm just looking at the minimum variance necessary to basically get what they have and not necessarily enhance, because we've seen a lot of applications here for extremely compelling reasons, which we have had to deny, because it involves just an improvement, you know, to the home. So that's why I'm struggling, in addition to the neighborhood opposition.
Any further discussion? Julie?
I guess just to kind of add on to that, I guess I would rather see, you know, part of where that walk-in closet is used, even if there is a variance for a smaller amount past that, somehow having a walk-in closet and then a carport that's entirely outside the setback it makes it hard for me to, when we follow what our standards for approval are, it it doesn't look like the minimum.
You ready for a motion? Dave?
No, sir, we're in closed session.
Petition ZBA 18-004, 440 Highland Road. Variance. Based on the following findings of fact and in accordance with the established standards for approval, the Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants the following variances from Chapter 55, Section 5:27, area, height, and placement regulations to allow an 18-foot by 20-foot detached carport in the front setback. The ordinance requires a 30-foot front setback. The detached carport will be 5 feet from the front property line. The carport is to be constructed per the submitted plans. A, the alleged practical difficulties are peculiar to the property and result from conditions which do not exist generally throughout the city. B, that the practical difficulties which will result from a failure to grant the variance include substantially more than mere inconvenience, inability to attain a higher financial return, or both. C, the variance, if granted, will not significantly affect surrounding properties. D, the circumstances of the variance request are not self-imposed. And E, the variance request is the minimum necessary to achieve reasonable use of the structure.
Do I have a motion? Do I have support? I'm sorry, I know somebody raised their hand, Nicole. Kirk?
No.
Charlotte?
No.
I also vote no. Mike?
No.
Dave?
No.
Nicole?
No.
Todd?
No.
Julie?
No.
The request is denied. Moving on to ZBA 18005, 615 East Huron Street. John?
Okay. Steve Dykstra, Hobbs and Black Architects, representing property owners AJ Capital Partners, is seeking a 22-foot, 10-inch variance from the required 130-foot maximum tower diagonal. The variance will allow the construction of a new elevator shaft, which will increase the building diagonal to 152 feet, 10 inches. The owners are also seeking permission to alter a non-conforming structure to construct a new rooftop, restaurant, and lounge. The current building height is 147 feet, 7 inches, and the maximum allowable height is 120 feet. The overall building height will not increase, but the alteration will allow for the expansion of the existing rooftop conditions. The property is zoned D1 Downtown District and is located in the northwest corner of the East Huron and South State Street intersection. The current use of the property is a hotel and was built in 1970. The applicant is proposing to construct a new elevator shaft to the east side of the building, which will extend the existing non-conforming diagonal dimension of the tower to 152 feet. The maximum allowable diagonal dimension allowed by the zoning ordinance is 130 feet, which was established in 2015 after the building was built. The new elevator shaft will provide accessibility to a new rooftop bar and restaurant area. If you'll turn your attention to the monitors, you see the first location map. The subject property is highlighted. It's near the intersection of Huron and State Street. I think we're all familiar with the property. You see the aerial map of the property and the subject building. The zoomed in aerial of the building, and you see from the aerial, you see the existing rooftop situation and the mechanicals and the penetrations above the rooftop line there as it exists. That's a good picture. It depicts the existing rooftop. This is the site plan that was submitted with the application. This is the existing rooftop plan. So you see the penetrations, and there's a stairwell and existing conditions on the site. These are the proposed rooftop plan. This is the elevator shaft that is proposed for the east side of the building. And you see, I'll let the architect describe more about it, but the restaurant, rooftop lounge, bar area. And these are the existing situation, the walls that exist now. And this is just an extension of that. Here's the roof addition. You see the elevator shaft going all the way to the top. This is a 3D conceptual view, and you see the restaurant area, proposed restaurant area. Proposed first floor plan, elevator shaft. Photos that were submitted with the application. More of the same. Renderings and drawings of what the proposed construction will look like of the rooftop, the deck, and the restaurant. These are my photos I took when I was out at the site. It's the Graduate Hotel. Adjacent property to the east. And the properties under construction to the west. And that's what I have right now. I'll take any questions.
Thank you, John. Any questions for staff? Dave?
The current height is in excess of the current zoning for this?
Yes.
And was this part of the recent change in D1 and D2?
Yes.
And what's the zoning now?
Is
it D1?
It's D1.
Okay. And the building that's under construction immediately adjacent, does that comply with the D1 zoning code?
It does, I believe, yep. And it was under site planning as well. So the one next door is being built to the current code requirements and the approved site plan as well.
Right, okay. I'm just, there, I'll, when we have discussion, I'll give you the reason for those questions.
Okay.
Or everybody the reason.
Any other questions for staff? Mike?
You might not know the answer to this, John, but so part of this proposal for the restaurant space on the roof, there's indoor and outdoor. In the warmer months, when people would use the outdoor, what's the city rule on when they'd have to not be outside? I mean, is it till closing? I've lived in other cities where outdoor space closes down earlier than the indoor space.
As far as I know, there's not an ordinance of when people have
So
to
they
be
could be out there,
inside,
they
but
could be out
there's-
there till 2.
Yes, but I'm not sure what their proposed hours are, but there is a noise ordinance that would be enforced by
Sure.
the police department.
Okay, that was a question.
Yep.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, if the petitioner's here, if you could please state your name for the record, sign in, you have 5 minutes.
Steve Dexter, Black Architects. And we represent AJ Capital, who, the owners of the Graduate Hotel. They purchased it from, they purchased the former Campus Inn a couple of years ago and renovated, did a complete interior renovation. And now we're looking at kind of taking it up a notch. There are AJ Capital and Graduate Hotel representatives here this evening. If you have any questions regarding more of the operations or the proposed operations of the building. So the intent here is to provide kind of an unusual amenity, both for the guests of the hotel as well as the residents of the city. So as we looked at how to access the roof, really, to make use of the wonderful views up there, it wasn't feasible to extend any of the existing elevators up to the roof level. The 2 passenger elevators are too small to meet accessibility codes, and the freight elevator is kind of in an awkward position. And they also are in that rooftop plan. They're in the smaller penthouse that's kind of to the north. That's already raised up from the existing roof. So if we were to try to extend maybe the freight elevator, it would require to add even like almost another story for the overrun of that. So by adding a new elevator that's essentially an express elevator that will have its own lobby right outside the east entrance of the hotel, then guests can enter through that. There'll be an extension of the first floor lobby, so they can go through that, and visitors from the city can do that as well, and it will be an express elevator to the rooftop level. And really, about the only place on the site where we could do that was on the east side of the building. So we kind of ended up connecting the east side and the west side, because west of the penthouses is the logical place to provide the actual seating area. So that's kind of how it ended up, with kind of the long walkway to get from the elevator over to the restaurant, to the bar itself. We've also been meeting with neighbors really from the very beginning in informal neighborhood meetings, and that kind of formed it guided the design to where it is now. You'll notice that really all of the new space is oriented to the south, and we see that as pretty much all a glass area to make use of the views and to have kind of a minimal impact on the facade of the building itself. And then we pulled everything away from the north elevation and have just service functions back there, so that there's really, we don't anticipate that there will be any real effects of noise or any kind of light issues based on the additional space here. As John pointed out, there's two issues at hand here really, that both spring from the 2015 zoning changes. The variance is actually granted, needs to be granted for the elevator addition, which will extend the existing diagonal, which was added in 2015, the maximum diagonal of 135 feet. We'll slightly extend that. So that's where the variance is, and the actual space itself is just adding on to a non-conforming structure. We're not adding any height to the building. The existing penthouses are already taller than what the addition will be. The existing FAR is less than 400% and will remain so. And I think that's about it. We're here for any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for the petitioner? Julie?
I think this is probably for the petitioner. We did have a letter from Ray Detter, and there was a thing, discussed plans to add a 9th floor restaurant and bar. That's...
No, it's actually not the 9th.
Okay.
It would be the 15th, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Rooftop.
then there were some other questions about negative impacts on residential neighbors, potential traffic and parking issues, architectural and design improvements, the adjoining Harris Hall building, noise, headlight issues, barrier wall. Like, are these things that you talk to the
Yes.
neighbors about?
Yeah, and I don't know if we want to have Luke address the neighborhood meetings. Luke Bonner, he was kind of spearheading that effort.
Would you like me to sign in first?
Please.
Please.
Okay. Luke Bonner, Bonner Advisory Group. Thank you. So we had a total of 5 neighborhood meetings, consisting of old Fourth Ward neighbors, neighbors along Ann Street. And through those neighborhood meetings, there were a lot of those concerns that had come up. One of them was parking. So what would the rooftop addition do to parking? And essentially, we have 20 additional spaces that are going to be freed up next door through an agreement with the hub. So that helps immediately there.
And that's the building under
Immediately
construction.
adjacent contiguous, well, not necessarily contiguous, but lot line contiguous to the west. We also are working through the food and beverage operation to consolidate some of the deliveries. We can actually move some of the parking that's next door into freed up space that would allow for more stack parking, so allow for more valet parking. We estimate up to potentially 10 more spaces. So from a parking standpoint, we think there's going to be 30 additional spaces freed up as a result of the hub and some of the delivery changes. There was a question about the commercial wall, but after we got through dialogue, that concern had more to do with the hub and the wall that was approved for that project. we actually talked through some of the specifications. We got the specs of the wall from the architect for that project, and we shared some of those specifications with the neighbors. So that necessarily did not end up being an issue. There was another neighbor, Paul Dunlap, that was concerned with the cooler on the ground floor. And we are going to actually go through some substantial upgrades through the chilling system that we think from efficiency standpoint will calm the ground floor cooler not to run as much and as hard, which will quiet that. And then we're also going to continue to look into potential fencing and barriers around that ground floor unit to even subsidize, or I'm sorry, relieve some of that noise as well for the neighbors. So those were generally issues. I know from a future standpoint, the neighbors wanted to know what's going to happen with Harris Hall. Is that going to be turned into a banquet center? AG Capital owns that. They are under a current 5-year lease. They expect that the tenant's going to continue to stay there, so there are no plans at all for Harris Hall. I think that there were plans previously discussed about connecting Harris Hall with the hotel for the previous ownership. That's not a plan of this group, so we talked through that with them also. We also discussed hours of operation. There's no real interest in having this be a college party bar. This is very intended to be very upscale to reflect almost the upscale nature of the ground floor bar right now and restaurant. So the hours aren't going to be until 2 o'clock. We've generally talked about 12 o'clock hours. Steve mentioned about pulling everything away from the neighborhood, so there were very much concerns about anybody that was up there that would look over into their backyards. So we wanted to make sure that there wasn't an opportunity for any patron of the bar to be able to do that also. But we did work through a number of issues. Each meeting sort of built on the other in terms of some original issues that came up that were addressed the next meeting. Some more issues came up, and I think generally by the end, as you'll see by some of the letters we got from Don Duquette and Paul Dunlap, Ray sent a nice letter in. We also had a letter from Chris Crockett today that we weren't able to submit due to deadlines, but generally speaking, I think everyone is interested to seeing a new amenity come to the neighborhood, in which I think they'll all probably enjoy a drink at some point or another. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I just had another couple of questions, I'm not sure. What will the elevator look like? I assume it's not going to be a bright red. Is it like a glass wall?
It'll be a metal panel structure. I think some of the elevations, the renderings, I have the renderings there, right? Oh, I guess, did our renderings not get into the package here?
I don't recall an elevator shaft rendering.
Okay.
Oh,
There are some that I don't. particularly put up.
Steve, is it that one?
Yes.
They have them in their packets.
No, but they have the exterior ones that were with that. Yeah, okay.
Everything,
Yeah.
everything is in their packet. It didn't make it to PowerPoint.
Oh, it just didn't make it onto the.
PowerPoint, yeah. They have it in their packets.
Gotcha,
Yep.
gotcha, gotcha. So the intent is that the elevator shaft is neutral color. Which one? I see, they got a little bit chopped up in this. And the elevator shaft isn't showing up.
I'm not seeing it.
Now you're seeing a nice view of the overall. Yeah. It's probably the best view of the elevator shaft. So the intent for that is to do a fairly neutral gray color that would be compatible with concrete of the structure, metal panel with an accent glass element. It could be glass or just kind of an accent material. To just give it a little highlight there.
Looks like an elevator shaft.
Did you have any other questions, Julie?
No, I think that's good, thank you.
Any, Kirk?
So some issues of accessibility were mentioned in that perhaps there'd be impracticality or difficulty of extending the
existing elevator.
shafts because they don't meet code. I don't suppose that this new elevator could help access other buildings for people with accessibility needs.
Other
Different-
buildings?
Different floors, I'm sorry, different floors within the building other than just the rooftop.
Because of the way the building is laid out, this elevator shaft goes right past a bunch of rooms that are on the end of the units. So if you tried to open up into any other floors, it would be into a guest room. Currently, they do use the existing freight elevator as an accessible elevator. It's been refurbished. It's got nice finishes in it. It's just that it's not in a real convenient location for the general public to use. But as far as accessing rooms, it does work for that.
Okay.
But this new elevator would obviously provide complete accessibility to the new amenity on the roof.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the, yeah, Nicole?
Did I hear you say that you'll be constructing a lobby on the exterior of the building to connect with this elevator?
Yeah, we haven't exactly fleshed that out yet. We've been concentrating most of our efforts on the upper floor. But if you look at the first floor plan,
It just looks like the
you'll see
elevator
that
entrance outside.
pardon?
It looks like you enter the elevator from the exterior.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
that area is covered right now. It's an enclosed space. And so it would be very easy to just add a new storefront to the south that would create a new lobby essentially. That would be part of the elevator as well, and then the revolving door would go away. We haven't actually decided how we want to handle that part yet, but I think that's probably how it's going to end up.
All right, thanks for the clarification.
Any other questions for the petitioner? All right, thank you very much. If there's anyone from the public to speak on this, if you'd like to step forward, sign in, state your name, now's your chance. All right, seeing no one, I will note that we did receive a letter of support from Don Duquette, a resident of Sloan Plaza, as well as letters from Ray Detter and Paul Dunlap that did not necessarily express support for the project, but expressed an appreciation for the design team and their willingness to answer questions and have neighborhood meetings and so forth. So with that said, we're in discussion. Dave?
One more follow-up question for John Barrett, our staff. On the description on your staff report, John, the description on your staff report, you say here the maximum allowable diagonal dimension allowed by the zoning ordinance is 130 feet, which was established in 2015 after the building was built. That's part of that D1 zoning, isn't it?
Yes.
This is the root cause of why I'm going to vote against this. The D1 zoning was passed with a lot of community input to, in some ways, increase the density of development downtown, but at the same time, to put limitations on heights and other aspects of building downtown. What this proposal is doing is going beyond that D1 zoning that was passed with a lot of community input and significant opposition because they thought it went too far. Some community members. What this proposes is taking a small part of that rooftop that you can't see from anywhere and bringing it out all the way to the street side facing on Huron Street. And I would say that this is effectively is adding a floor to the top of the structure. At the same time, it's increasing the diagonal. And I'm going to have to, in the spirit of maintaining our support for the D1 zoning, which the adjacent structure complies with, I would have to vote against this.
Mike?
Oh, Kirk was. Oh, go ahead. Okay. I think Dave makes some good points. I'm going to vote for this. I think that the additional, the additional elevator shaft to me doesn't really change much about the look of the building. I think the use of the space on the roof, I'm frankly for something like this, rather than just having an empty rooftop. They're not, to me, adding a floor. This is an amenity that I think will bring a ton of value to residents of the city to be able to sit up that high and have a nice meal and have a beverage. We don't have a good alternative in Ann Arbor, and I think especially in the warmer months when you can be outside a bit up there, I think it's gonna be pretty neat, and to me, it's not changing enough about the building for me to feel like it's violating our principles, so I'm gonna vote for this.
Kirk?
Thank you. I guess I definitely appreciate everything that's been said so far. If I could ask Mr. Barrett something. So just to help us make sure everybody knows what we're trying to tease apart here, it's sort of a twofer request, right? I mean, one has to do with the diagonal, which was not, the diagonal imposition was that with the original A2D2 zoning, or was that when North Huron was designated as a further sort of reduced district? Because the original D1, D2 zoning was back in what, 2008 or 10, right?
Yeah, this is building far precedes any zoning historic or character district overlays. And any diagonal tower requirements. It's an existing non-conforming structure.
Right. So the second part about
any new
altering
new penetrations or additions to it has to meet that, in which it doesn't. But it is an existing non-conforming.
So the sort of filling in of the rooftop, almost up to the point of where the mechanicals are now, is the second part, which is altering a non-conforming structure.
Correct.
The first part has to do with the violation of the, I guess, further violation of the diagonals?
I would say further extension of the tower diagonal.
Right, okay,
Yep.
so as it is, you know, the way that the zoning was reformed was to sort of prevent buildings that are sort of this blocky in the future, to put it in a very brief way. Right?
Or try to govern massing and create more of a
skinny, right.
As
Okay.
it goes up towards the top of the structure, to not have as blocky or.
Right.
Yep.
So.
Have recessed floors, I would say.
Got it. And so in an idea, okay. So they're already in violation of the
Existing
diagonal.
non-conforming. They're not in violation, but it's an existing non-conforming.
Okay, right.
Yep,
Okay,
they don't
thank-
meet the requirements of today's standards.
Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
And because the new elevator, the only place to really put a new one would be on the, tacking on the outside of the building, is what creates that further
Extension.
diagonal
Yep. Yes.
dimension, okay. Is it the case that sometimes, and this is not the case here, but I'm thinking that, you know, I've heard that some communities, when they look at diagonals or floor area ratio, sometimes they make exceptions for mechanicals, elevators, even hallways, as contributing to calculations, like diagonals or floor area ratio. Is that correct?
You're saying other communities?
Right.
We have something in our ordinance as well. You know, we have a thing where it allows appurtenances, space for a single-family residence structure, eaves, gutters, overhangs. I think that's where you're trying to go with this and equate this to, that this is not habitable space or it's not conditioned space. But I think it still counts toward it because it's still adding, increasing
Mass.
the actual massing and the, it's an extension of the building. And so I don't think appurtenances gives it any type of leeway.
Oh, I was thinking more of, some zoning codes I've seen, they make exceptions for elevator shafts or,
Yep.
you know, other things. You know, so this is being treated as though perhaps that whole wall were being blown out to that depth, because then you're really increasing the diagonal of the building.
Right, whereas it's just this portion, a small elevator shaft portion that's pushing it out. It's not the whole length of the building. Correct.
So, and just looking at some of the criteria like minimum use, minimum change necessary, there would be no way to access, I'm just kind of fact checking what the petitioner is saying. There would be no way to access the the alteration of the non-conforming structure, meaning the rooftop area. There would be no way to access it without adding an elevator. Is that your impression?
Yes, and I think Mr. Dykrus said if they were to do one within the interior, it would have to increase out the roof and it would have to add another story onto it. So I think without going interior and adding more height to the building, to do something on the exterior and be as least obtrusive as possible, this is their best option.
Okay, I guess I'd like to hear some more comments. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Julie?
I think I feel pretty comfortable with this, actually. When I look at our what we need to judge on, I do think that this particular property is, it's kind of been one of those buildings in Ann Arbor that people look at and say, wow. And I actually think adding sort of a pretty glass top will reduce some of the impact a little bit of that kind of brutalist concrete outside. It is very nice inside, but you don't get a lot of that from the outside. You don't get a warm and fuzzy feeling from the outside. And I think that it actually could help a little bit with that. I do think it is, this is a property you didn't build, and there isn't a lot of room. I understand how putting new elevator shafts in the inside of a building is difficult and extraordinarily expensive. And I think there are hardships that are more than mere inconvenience. This seems to be a fairly minimum variance to me. It's not building on particularly, and I don't think most people will even notice it, and I think if you do notice it, it's not going to be a bad thing. I just think I think you have tried to have it give little impact on the neighbors. It's not self-imposed. I mean, you could say not to do it at all. I realize the hotel business is tricky, and a lot of the new hotels have pools and things that you do not. And this is maybe a little bit of an ability. We don't want this building. I mean, this building is here, and it should be successful. I think that helps all of us. I just think it's relatively minimal, given that you could be requesting something else that in that area, and I'm going to vote for it unless I hear other arguments.
Dave?
I'm going to speak to the standards for approval of a variance, and I think it's clear that this does not meet three of the standards before us. One, the practical difficulties which will result from a failure to grant the variance include substantially more than mere inconvenience, inability to attain a higher financial return, or both. It's clear to me that the whole idea of the structure on the rooftop, the restaurant, is to achieve a higher financial return from this building. The building is already a successful hotel, and the elevator, its only purpose is to bring people in an express fashion up to this added floor, which is a new commercial use, to attain a higher financial return. D, the circumstances of the variance request are not self-imposed. The developer purchased this building 2 years ago. They knew the environment that they were coming into and the structure that they had to work with. I would argue that their purchase of the building 2 years ago is a self-imposition of the situation that they're in. The variance request is the minimum necessary to achieve reasonable use of the land or structure. The structure is already used in a reasonable way, and the developer, I'm sure, recognized that there was by converting many of the rooms in a luxury fashion, they were able to return on their investment, and they're making a reasonable use of the land or structure. The minimum necessary is to do nothing. So I would say that this violates all three of those standards for granting a variance.
Mike?
I will say on the financial return point, I think, I'm not gonna argue with Dave on the point that this will probably increase the value of the building to the owners, but it also brings a lot of value to the people who stay at the hotel and the residents of Ann Arbor who have a new amenity. So I think looking at it just will the value of the building go up as the only way to analyze financial return, to me, is a little cynical here. This is not a single-family home that is gonna be sold off by one family. This brings a lot of value, in my eyes, to both the people who stay at the hotel, who come and visit Ann Arbor, and the people in the city. So that's how I don't, for this type of request, view financial return that narrowly.
That's why they're doing it.
All right.
Todd?
Yes, I do agree with Dave DeVarty's comments on those three criteria, and those are the ones that were bothering me. That in the strictest sense, they don't meet 3 of the 5 criteria. So that's one side. The other side, though, and I do, when Dave DeVarty was saying the concerns about the height of the buildings, I have great concerns with the increasing of heights of the buildings downtown. Ann Arbor still has a very different feel from Grand Rapids, which is a much more personal feel, but that's not what we're about today or what we're doing. So the height is a hot issue. That said, though, what I look at is the bottom of page 5 of their material. They note that the top of the elevator shaft is not going to exceed the height of the mechanical penthouse. So in one sense, the only reason that it's here is because the diagonal measurement changes. But if one is on the street looking at it, what you gauge, of course, is the height of the building. And the elevator shaft is going to be below the current top height of the structure. So that's the other side. It doesn't meet the criteria, but are we here just because of an overly technical requirement because they triggered a change of the diagonal? And so I haven't quite sorted out both of those. How do I weigh those two things? It clearly doesn't meet the criteria, but, you know, are we being overly picky because of the criteria when the elevator shaft is not going to exceed the current height of the structure? So that's what I'm trying to weigh in my mind. Does anybody have a comment in one way or the other on how I'm looking at the change in the height? The elevator shaft does not go above the current structure.
I think your second analysis is stronger, Todd.
Kirk?
Thanks. I guess the way I'm coming down on this is, I guess the rooftop to me is the more complete use of the roof is to me a no-brainer. I mean, it resembles a lot of petitions that we get where it's, you know, it's already a piece of the house is already this far into the setback, and we kind of let them fill in the gap or the envelope as we saw earlier tonight. Not that anything, again, that we do is precedent setting. I'm just, this is just my line of thinking. We've also had petitions where, you know, they add on to the back and then, you know, they violate the side yard setback, and then not just in one little area, but the whole length of the house, and go up 2 stories to get more, you know, apartments. And to me, using the analysis of this violates the diagonal because the envelope is extended because they're putting on this elevator shaft, which is the only way they can access the roof. So if they came in looking to add, you know, 15 feet to the whole side of the building and put in, you know, another set of rooms or whatever, that would be a different story. I guess the way I'm seeing this is that the elevator is a tool, the minimum tool necessary to take advantage of the rooftop space. And that's why some cities don't use them in calculations and so on. So I think it's a fine line because rules are rules. But I think this is unique because new zoning was imposed on this side of the street pretty recently.
Dave?
I just want to enter into the record that we received just now laid on our table a letter in opposition to this project from Caitlin Rehberger that was sent Saturday, February 17th. And we just received it after we started discussion of this. I think it's important that this be entered into the record, though, as a letter in opposition, and that the board members here take a minute to peruse it.
Any other discussion or motion?
Question about procedure.
Yeah.
Because the two are connected, or we're going to be voting on both of them at the same time? Or do you want to address only the variance, and then if that doesn't pass, then there's no need to go to the second one? Maybe it's making it more
I think they
complex
are
than
two
necessary.
separate.
Yeah, I
But
would
they
do
certainly
it-
hang or fall together.
Right. I
Yes,
guess,
I guess this is a question for staff.
You can take them up separately or together, whichever you choose.
Okay.
You're gonna build an elevator to nothing?
right, they're absolutely connected, so
A
it
restaurant you can't get to.
doesn't matter either way. You can separate it, and
I mean,
if
they're
one
really
fails, then
connected.
the other one
That's
just
right.
gets
We can approve the
dismissed.
elevator, but then deny the restaurant. No, that would not be good, Mike. So together, I guess?
Yeah, we'll take them together, yeah. Nicole?
But could we deny this elevator and they find a different way to reach a rooftop deck?
They
or
could.
Rooftop restaurant?
Yeah, it's true.
Which would
Oh.
then, if based on previous discussion, would require a variance. If it was gonna come out of the roof, and they said they were gonna have to add another story to the building, then they'd be back in here for a variance for that.
A variance just for the elevator overrun.
Extending the height of the building.
This is probably a chairman decision. A chairperson
Let's
decision.
separate them just for fun.
Can I
Yeah,
ask a
go.
further question of staff? And since we did get correspondence late in the game here,
I apologize for that.
no, it's okay. You know, they had neighborhood meetings. I don't, you know, and looking at this, this does not really address an impact on the surrounding properties. So I just want to, maybe, I don't know if this warrants bringing up the petition, or just to make sure all the i's are dotted and t's crossed, because I know they've been meeting with the residents, and I don't know if this person participated or not. I mean, if people want to give this weight, it doesn't appear to be an impact on the surrounding property. So I wanted to raise that and see if anybody wants to chase it down. It wouldn't impact my decision. I just
So
want
it's at 413 East here, it's 2 blocks away.
I'm good.
Motion, somebody? Mike?
So I want
You
to
have a
make a
comment?
motion to what we have here, so.
Go for it.
But I heard you say you want us to separate this into two.
Either way.
Either way.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
I'll make the motion. Based on the following findings of fact and in accordance with the established standards for approval, the Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants the following variances from Chapter 55, Section 510.20A, Downtown Character Overlay Districts, to allow a variance of 22 feet 10 inches in order to construct a new elevator shaft, which increases the building diagonal to 152 feet 10 inches. The elevator shaft is to be built per the submitted plans. The alleged practical difficulties are peculiar to the property and result from conditions which do not exist generally throughout the city. B, that the practical difficulties which will result from a failure to grant the variance include substantially more than mere inconvenience, inability to attain a higher financial return, or both. C, the variance, if granted, will not significantly affect surrounding properties. D, the circumstances of the variance request are not self-imposed. E, the variance request is the minimum necessary to achieve reasonable use of the land or structure. Oh, sorry, this is petition ZBA 18005. I'm not going to read all that again. Permission to alter a non-conforming structure based on the following findings of fact and in accordance with the established standards for approval. The Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants permission to alter a non-conforming structure to construct a new rooftop restaurant and lounge. The construction is to be built per submitted plans. A, the alteration complies as nearly as practicable with the requirements of the zoning chapter. It will not have a detrimental effect on neighboring property.
Do I have support? Support Kirk. Dave?
No.
Nicole?
No.
Todd?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Charlotte?
No.
I'm voting yes. Just put it down.
Thanks, Mike.
Yes. My name is also Mike. Can I vote for Mike Dobmeyer, too?
All right, I vote yes. Motion is approved.
Squeaked by.
Moving on. The last item was removed from the agenda. We've dealt with all the new business. We have no unfinished business. Reports and communications have been addressed. Is there any additional public comment? Anyone? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? From Mike, support? Nicole, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.